The thunder of hooves against the dry earth matched the pounding in Olivia Blackwood's heart as she raced away from the only home she had known for the past 3 years. The cool night air stung her tear-streaked face, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust. Behind her, the small ranch house grew smaller on the horizon, taking with it the prison of her marriage to Harold Blackwood, a marriage that had left more scars than memories. It was 1875 in the Arizona Territory, and Olivia was 22 years old with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small bundle of possessions, and a desperate need to escape. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert landscape as she urged her mare, Penny, faster through the night. "Come on, girl," she whispered, leaning low over the horse's neck. "Just a little farther." The bruises on her ribs ached with every gallop, and her split lip had only just begun to heal. Harold's last rage had been the worst yet, and Olivia knew if she stayed, she might not survive the next one. The faint lights of the small town of Redemption Springs glimmered in the distance. It wasn't much a dusty main street with a handful of businesses, a church, and the promise of anonymity. Most importantly, it was 30 miles from Harold's ranch, and with any luck, he wouldn't think to look for her there until she could figure out her next move. As she approached the outskirts of town, Olivia slowed Penny to a walk. The streets were quiet, with only a few lanterns burning in windows. The saloon at the far end of town still buzzed with activity, piano music drifting through the night air. She avoided it, turning instead toward a small boarding house she'd spotted on her one previous visit to town. Mrs. Abigail Walsh, a widow in her 50s, answered Olivia's hesitant knock with suspicious eyes that softened when they fell upon the young woman's battered face. "Lord have mercy, child," the older woman gasped, opening the door wider. "Come in before you fall down." Olivia swayed on her feet, exhaustion from the long ride and days of fear catching up to her. "I can pay," she managed, reaching for the small pouch of coins she'd saved in secret over months. "I need a room, just for a few nights." Mrs. Walsh's weathered hand closed over Olivia's trembling fingers. "Put that away for now. Let's get you settled first." The small room under the eaves was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the back garden. Olivia sank onto the edge of the mattress, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of a stranger. "Your husband?" Mrs. Walsh asked quietly, setting down a basin of warm water and a clean cloth. Olivia nodded, unable to meet the woman's eyes. "Well, you're safe here tonight," Mrs. Walsh said firmly. "Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." When the door closed behind her, Olivia finally allowed herself to break down, muffling her sobs in the thin pillow. Freedom tasted sweet, but terror still gripped her heart. Harold would come looking for her. He'd never let her go. Morning brought with it the smells of coffee and fresh bread. Olivia dressed carefully, doing her best to hide the fading bruises on her face with her long auburn hair. She'd need work if she was going to stay in Redemption Springs, and she couldn't afford to appear too desperate or damaged. Mrs. Walsh was waiting for her in the small dining room, a plate of eggs and toast already on the table. "Sit and eat," she instructed, "then we'll talk about what's next." Olivia picked at her food, her stomach still knotted with anxiety. "I can cook and clean," she offered. "I'm good with a needle, too." "What's your name, dear?" Olivia Miller." She couldn't bring herself to use Blackwood, not anymore. Mrs. Walsh studied her thoughtfully. "Well, Miss Miller, as it happens, I could use some help around the boarding house, room and board, plus a small wage." "It's not much, but it would give you time to get on your feet." Relief flooded through Olivia. "I'd be very grateful, Mrs. Walsh." "Good. You can start by helping me with the laundry." The older woman paused, her expression growing serious. "If your husband comes looking for you, he will," Olivia said softly. "Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Redemption Springs might be small, but we look after our own." The days fell into a pattern. Olivia rose early, helping with breakfast for the boarders, mostly traveling salesmen and the occasional family passing through. She learned the rhythm of the house, finding comfort in the mundane tasks of cleaning, cooking, and mending. Mrs. Walsh asked few questions but offered steady support, teaching Olivia to manage the small business and introducing her to trusted townspeople. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The bruises faded, though the fear remained. Olivia jumped at sudden noises and kept to the shadows when venturing into town for supplies. Each day without Harold appearing was both a blessing and a torment, the waiting almost worse than the confrontation she knew must eventually come. It was a sweltering Tuesday afternoon when Olivia first saw him, not Harold, but the man who would change the course of her life. She was hanging laundry in the back garden when the sound of hammering drew her attention to the neighboring property. A tall figure worked steadily on the roof of the old Miller place, which had stood abandoned for years. The man moved with easy confidence, the muscles in his arms and back visible even from a distance as he worked in his shirt sleeves under the hot sun. Sensing her gaze, he paused and turned, shading his eyes against the glare. Olivia quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught staring. Later that evening, Mrs. Walsh mentioned the newcomer over dinner. "Owen Caldwell bought the old Miller place, paid cash from what I hear. Came from somewhere up Colorado way, plans to raise horses according to Mr. Peterson at the bank." Olivia nodded, feigning only polite interest while her heart inexplicably beat faster. "It needs a lot of work." "That it does," Mrs. Walsh agreed, "but he seems the capable sort. Quiet, keeps to himself, been in town about a week now." The next morning, Olivia nearly collided with Owen Caldwell himself as she left the general store, her arms full of supplies. He steadied her with strong hands on her shoulders, preventing the packages from tumbling to the ground. "Careful there, madam," he said, his voice deep and pleasant. "I'm sorry," Olivia murmured, stepping back quickly. "I wasn't watching where I was going." He was even more handsome up close, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and his dark hair curled slightly where it met the collar of his shirt. He wasn't dressed like the cowboys who frequented the saloon, with their flashy vests and jangling spurs. His clothes were plain but well-made, practical for a man who worked with his hands. "No harm done," he replied, tipping his hat. "Can I help you with those packages?" "No," the word came out more forcefully than she'd intended. "No, thank you, I'm just going back to the boarding house." Something in his expression shifted as he took in her fading bruises and nervous demeanor. His eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained gentle. "As you wish, miss." "Miller, Olivia Miller, Owen Caldwell," he nodded respectfully. "I'm your new neighbor, it seems." "Yes, Mrs. Walsh mentioned you'd bought the place next door." Olivia shifted uncomfortably under his steady gaze. Men made her nervous now, especially ones who looked at her too closely. "I should get back. Good day, Mr. Caldwell." She hurried away, feeling his eyes on her back until she turned the corner. There was something about him that unsettled her, not in the way Harold had, with his unpredictable temper and cruel words. This was different, a strange flutter in her chest that she didn't want to examine too closely. Over the next few days, Olivia found herself watching Owen Caldwell from a distance as he worked on his property. He'd brought in lumber and supplies, and the sound of construction became a constant backdrop to her days. Occasionally, she glimpsed him riding out at dawn on a magnificent black stallion, returning as dusk fell. A week after their first meeting, Owen appeared at the boarding house door just before supper, hat in hand as he spoke with Mrs. Walsh. Olivia hung back in the kitchen doorway, listening. "I was hoping to engage your services for a meal or two each day," he was saying. "I'm making progress on the house, but the kitchen's still a ways from being functional, and I confess I'm getting tired of my own cooking over a campfire." Mrs. Walsh chuckled. "We'd be happy to add you to our table, Mr. Caldwell. We serve breakfast at 6 and supper at 6, $5 a week for both meals." "That's more than fair." He glanced past her, catching sight of Olivia. "Evening, Miss Miller." Olivia nodded stiffly before retreating to the kitchen, her cheeks warm. Something about the man's direct gaze made her feel exposed, as though he could see through the careful walls she'd built around herself. The next morning, Owen arrived promptly at 6, taking a seat at the communal table with the other three boarders: Mr. Jenkins, the telegraph operator, Mr. Simmons, a traveling salesman, and Miss Cooper, the new schoolteacher. Olivia served the food silently, keeping her eyes lowered. "Miss Miller," Owen said as she placed a plate of biscuits on the table, "I noticed your boarding house garden could use some attention. The fence is falling down in places." Olivia glanced at Mrs. Walsh, uncertain how to respond. "That it does," Mrs. Walsh sighed. "Been meaning to hire someone to fix it, but good help is hard to find these days." "I'd be happy to take a look at it," Owen offered. "As a thank you for the fine cooking." "That's very kind," Mrs. Walsh said before Olivia could object. "Perhaps this Sunday after church." Owen nodded, his eyes finding Olivia's. "If that suits everyone." She looked away quickly, mumbling something about checking on the coffee before escaping to the kitchen. His kindness felt dangerous somehow, like a trap she couldn't afford to fall into. Sunday arrived clear and bright. Olivia had hoped to avoid the interaction by attending church with Mrs. Walsh, but her employer suggested she stay behind to prepare the midday meal while Owen worked on the fence. "It'll give you a chance to rest," Mrs. Walsh said, though her knowing smile suggested other motives. "You've been working too hard lately." Left alone, Olivia busied herself in the kitchen, nervously watching through the window as Owen arrived with tools and lumber. He worked methodically, removing broken boards and replacing them with new ones. Despite herself, she found his movements captivating: the easy strength with which he handled the heavy posts, the careful precision of each nail driven home. When he paused to wipe sweat from his brow, Olivia impulsively poured a glass of cool water and carried it out to him. He looked up in surprise as she approached, a smile spreading across his face. "Thank you," he said, accepting the glass. "Just what I needed." Olivia nodded, turning to leave, but his voice stopped her. "You don't have to be afraid of me, Miss Miller." She froze, then slowly turned back. "I'm not afraid of you." Owen's expression was gentle but knowing. "Your eyes say different." He took a long drink of water before continuing. "Someone hurt you. I'm sorry for that." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "You don't know anything about me. I know enough." He set the glass down on a fence post. "I know you flinch when a man raises his voice. I know you watch the road from town like you're expecting trouble, and I know those bruises you had when you first came to town weren't from falling downstairs." Anger flared, hot and unexpected. "And what business is it of yours, Mr. Caldwell?" "None at all," he conceded, holding up his hands. "Except that I believe everyone deserves to feel safe." He picked up his hammer again, turning back to the fence. "You don't have to talk to me. But if trouble comes looking for you, I'd like to know what I might be facing." Olivia stood rooted to the spot, torn between indignation and a strange sense of relief that someone had seen through her careful facade. "My husband," she finally said, the words barely audible. "He'll come eventually." Owen nodded, continuing his work as though they were discussing nothing more significant than the weather. "Does he have a name, this husband?" "Harold Blackwood." "And would I recognize him if he rode into town?" Olivia swallowed hard. "He's tall, blonde hair, has a scar across his right cheek. Usually wears a brown leather vest with silver buttons." Owen drove another nail into the fence post with perhaps more force than necessary. "Thank you for telling me, Miss Miller. I'll keep an eye out." He glanced up at her. "Does the law know you're here?" She shook her head. "Sheriff Thompson is Harold's cousin." Something dark flashed in Owen's eyes. "I see." He straightened up, studying her face. "Well, Redemption Springs seems like a nice town. Might be a good place for a fresh start." The conversation was interrupted by the return of Mrs. Walsh and the other boarders from church. Olivia retreated to the kitchen, her mind whirling with conflicted emotions. She'd revealed more to Owen Caldwell in 5 minutes than she had to anyone since arriving in town, and she wasn't sure whether to be terrified or relieved. Over the next few weeks, Owen became a regular presence at the boarding house table. He never again mentioned their conversation about Harold, but Olivia felt his protective gaze whenever they were in the same room. He treated her with a careful respect, never pushing for more conversation than she was willing to give, but always including her with a question about the food or a comment about his progress on his house. Gradually, Olivia found herself relaxing in his presence. There was something steady about Owen Caldwell that calmed her frayed nerves. He wasn't like the other men she'd known, not like her father, who drunk away their small farm and then sold her to Harold to cover his debts, and certainly not like Harold himself, whose charm had quickly given way to jealousy and violence once the marriage certificate was signed. Owen spoke little of his past, though snippets emerged during dinner conversations. He'd fought briefly in the war as a young man, then spent years working cattle drives before saving enough to buy his own place. He had no family to speak of, having lost his parents when he was young. "What made you choose Redemption Springs?" Mrs. Walsh asked one evening as they lingered over coffee. Owen's eyes flicked briefly to Olivia before he answered. "Seemed like the kind of place where a man could start fresh. The land was good, the price was right." He smiled slightly. "And the name appealed to me." "Redemption," Olivia murmured, surprised to find herself joining the conversation. "It's a powerful word." Owen's gaze held hers. "That it is, Miss Miller. Do you believe in it?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I'd like to." As summer deepened into fall, Olivia began to hope that perhaps Harold had decided she wasn't worth the trouble of tracking down. She ventured more freely into town, even attending church with Mrs. Walsh on Sundays. Owen often walked with them, a protective presence that drew curious glances from the townspeople. Gossip inevitably followed. Olivia overheard whispers in the general store about the mysterious widow and the handsome newcomer, speculation about their relationship that made her cheeks burn. Mrs. Walsh dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "Small towns run on gossip like engines run on coal," she told Olivia. "Best to ignore it." Owen seemed unbothered by the talk. He continued his methodical work on his property, which was taking shape as a respectable ranch. He'd brought in a small herd of horses, beautiful animals that he worked with patient skill. Sometimes, Olivia watched from the garden as he gentled a particularly spirited mare, his movements calm and assured. One crisp October afternoon, Owen appeared at the boarding house with an unexpected invitation. "I've finished the main house," he told Olivia as she swept the front porch. "I was hoping you and Mrs. Walsh might come for supper tomorrow, as a thank you for all the meals these past months." Olivia hesitated, but Mrs. Walsh appeared in the doorway behind her, beaming. "We'd be delighted, wouldn't we, Olivia?" Trapped, Olivia nodded. "That's very kind of you." The following evening, they walked the short distance to Owen's property just as the sun was setting. Olivia wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that Mrs. Walsh had helped her make, and had pinned her hair up in a style she hadn't worn since before her marriage. She felt oddly nervous, as though this were something more significant than a neighborly supper. Owen greeted them at the door of the newly completed house, looking different in clean trousers and a pressed shirt. He'd trimmed his beard and combed his hair, and Olivia was struck again by how handsome he was. "Ladies, welcome," he said, ushering them inside with a smile. "I hope you'll forgive any roughness. I'm more used to bunkhouses than proper homes." The main room was simply but carefully furnished, with a solid table, comfortable chairs, and bookshelves built into one wall. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting a warm glow over the space. Through an open door, Olivia glimpsed a tidy kitchen where something savory simmered on the stove. "It's lovely," she said honestly, surprised by the homey feeling of the place. "Very impressive, Mr. Caldwell," Mrs. Walsh agreed, looking around with approval. "You've created quite a home here." Owen ducked his head, seeming almost shy. "Thank you. Please sit down. Supper's almost ready." The meal was simple but delicious: venison stew, fresh bread, and apple pie that Owen admitted he'd purchased from the bakery in town. The conversation flowed easily with Mrs. Walsh doing most of the talking while Owen and Olivia exchanged occasional glances across the table. After they'd eaten, Owen suggested a brief tour of the property before the light faded completely. Mrs. Walsh begged off, claiming her knees weren't up to the walk, but insisted that Olivia go. "I'll just rest by the fire with my tea," she said with a too innocent smile. "Take your time." Outside, the evening air was cool and fragrant with pine and sage. Owen led Olivia toward the corral where his horses grazed peacefully in the twilight. "You've accomplished so much in such a short time," Olivia said, breaking the slightly awkward silence between them. Owen leaned against the fence, his profile outlined against the deepening blue of the sky. "Having a purpose helps, a reason to build something lasting." A beautiful Palomino mare approached the fence and Owen reached out to stroke her nose. "This is Sunshine, she's the gentlest of the bunch." The horse nuzzled his hand, and Olivia found herself smiling at the obvious affection between man and animal. "She's beautiful. Would you like to pet her?" Olivia hesitated, then stepped closer. Owen took her hand gently, guiding it to the mare's soft muzzle. The simple touch of his fingers on hers sent an unexpected warmth through her body. "She likes you," Owen said softly, his eyes on Olivia's face rather than the horse. Olivia stroked the mare's nose, hyper-aware of Owen's proximity. "I used to love riding, before Harold," she nodded, withdrawing her hand. "He didn't like me going far from the ranch, said it wasn't proper for a wife to be galloping around the countryside." Owen's expression darkened. "Some men confuse control with love. I was foolish to marry him," Olivia said, voicing thoughts she'd kept to herself for years. "I believed his promises, thought he was rescuing me from my father's debts." "You were young," Owen said gently. "And desperate circumstances can make any port look safe in a storm." Olivia glanced at him, surprised by his understanding. "Yes, exactly. By the time I realized what kind of man he truly was, it was too late. I was his property legally and completely." Owen's jaw tightened. "No human being should be property. The law disagrees when it comes to wives. The law isn't always right." Owen turned to face her fully. "Olivia, I want you to know that if Harold Blackwood ever shows his face in Redemption Springs, you won't face him alone." The simple declaration brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Why would you risk yourself for someone you barely know?" Owen was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady on her face. "Maybe because I recognize something in you, a strength you might not even see in yourself, or maybe—" He hesitated, then continued more softly. "Maybe because from the moment I saw you hanging laundry in that garden, something inside me knew you were important." Olivia's heart thundered in her chest. No man had ever spoken to her with such simple honesty. She didn't know how to respond, torn between the longing to trust and the fear of being hurt again. "We should get back," she finally said. "Mrs. Walsh will wonder where we are." Owen nodded, respecting her retreat. As they walked back to the house, he kept a careful distance between them, but Olivia felt his presence like a physical force, pulling at something long buried inside her. It was 3 days later when Harold Blackwood rode into Redemption Springs. Olivia was in the general store, examining bolts of fabric with Mrs. Walsh, when she heard the commotion outside. A group of riders had arrived, dust billowing around them as they dismounted in front of the saloon. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of a brown leather vest with silver buttons, and her blood turned to ice. "It's him," she whispered, gripping Mrs. Walsh's arm. The older woman's face paled. "Are you certain?" Olivia nodded, already backing toward the rear of the store. "I need to get back to the boarding house. If I stay out of sight, too late for that," Mrs. Walsh said grimly, looking toward the door. "Someone will have mentioned you're in town. We need to find Mr. Caldwell." As if summoned by her words, Owen appeared in the doorway of the store, his expression tense. "Olivia," he said, crossing quickly to her side, "I saw them ride in. Is it him?" "Yes," she managed, her voice trembling. "The one in the brown vest with the scar on his cheek." Owen's eyes hardened. "I need to get you somewhere safe. Is there a back way out of here?" Mr. Peterson, the storekeeper, had been watching the exchange with concern. "Through the storeroom," he offered, gesturing to a door behind the counter. "Comes out in the alley, but where will you go?" If that's really her husband, he has the law on his side. "He's right," Olivia said, desperation clawing at her throat. "Harold will have papers proving I'm his wife. No one will stop him from taking me." "I will," Owen said with quiet conviction. He turned to Mrs. Walsh. "Can you create a distraction, something to keep them occupied at the saloon for a few minutes?" The older woman straightened her shoulders. Leave it to me. Mr. Peterson, I believe I forgot my reticule here yesterday, the one with my special brooch. Would you mind helping me look for it? Understanding dawned on the storekeeper's face. Of course, Mrs. Walsh, it might take some time to find it. As they moved toward the front of the store, Owen led Olivia through the back door and into the narrow alley. My horse is tied behind the barber shop, he said, keeping his voice low. We'll ride to my place and figure out what to do next. There's nothing to figure out, Olivia said, struggling to keep up with his long strides. Harold won't leave without me. He's too proud to let a wife escape him. It would damage his reputation. Owen stopped, turning to face her with intensity burning in his blue eyes. Do you want to go back to him? No, the word erupted from her like a prayer, but I don't see how, then trust me. Owen took her hands in his touch gentle despite the urgency of the moment. I won't let him hurt you again, I promise. Something in his voice, in the steadfast certainty of his gaze, broke through Olivia's panic. She nodded, allowing him to lead her through the maze of back alleys to where his black stallion waited. Owen lifted her easily onto the horse's back, then swung up behind her. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, his chest solid and warm against her back. In any other circumstance, the intimacy of the position would have flustered Olivia, but in that moment, she felt only gratitude for his strength and protection. They rode hard for Owen's ranch, taking a circuitous route through the hills rather than the main road. By the time they reached the property, Olivia was breathless and trembling, partly from the exertion and partly from fear. Owen helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist to steady her. Come inside, we need to talk. The house that had seemed so welcoming days before now felt like a fortress, solid walls between her and Harold's anger. Owen built up the fire while Olivia paced nervously. He'll come here, she said. Someone will have seen us together in town. They'll tell him about you. Owen nodded grimly. I'm counting on it. He gestured for her to sit, then took the chair opposite her. Olivia, there's something I haven't told you about myself, she stilled, suddenly wary. What do you mean? Before I came to Redemption Springs, I was a deputy marshal in Colorado Territory. Owen's expression was serious. I spent 6 years tracking down men who thought they were above the law. Olivia stared at him, trying to reconcile this new information with the quiet rancher she'd come to know. Why didn't you say anything? Because I left that life behind. I've seen too much violence, too much blood. He ran a hand through his hair. I came here to build something different, something peaceful. A wry smile touched his lips. And then I met you and realized some fights are still worth having. I don't want you to fight for me, Olivia said, though her heart contradicted her words. Harold is dangerous when he's angry. So am I, Owen replied simply, but unlike him, I don't hurt those weaker than myself. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Olivia, I have a suggestion, but I need you to understand that it's just that, a suggestion. You're free to refuse, she nodded cautiously. What is it? Marry me. The words hung in the air between them, shocking in their simplicity. Olivia gaped at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Marry me, Owen repeated. Today, before Harold can claim you, Reverend Thomas would do it if we explained the situation. As your new husband, I'd have the legal right to protect you from Harold. But we barely know each other, Olivia protested, even as something warm and hopeful unfurled in her chest. Owen's eyes held her steadily. I know enough. I know you're kind and strong, that you work hard and care deeply. I know that despite everything you've endured, you still find moments to smile. His voice softened. And I know that when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I have in years. That's not love, Olivia whispered, though she wondered if perhaps it was the beginning of something that could be. No, Owen agreed. Love grows over time with trust and shared experiences. But I believe it could grow between us, Olivia, if you're willing to take that chance. She looked away, overwhelmed by the choice before her, and if it doesn't, if we marry and you come to regret it, then we'd find a solution that gives you your freedom and independence, Owen said firmly. I'd make sure you had the means to go wherever you wished, be whoever you want to be. It was the most generous offer anyone had ever made her, not a demand or a bargain, but a choice, a real choice with dignity and respect at its core. Why would you do this? She asked, needing to understand. Owen was quiet for a moment. Because I know what it's like to feel trapped, he finally said, to have no good options, and because— He hesitated, then continued more softly, because from the first moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. As though we were meant to find each other. A noise outside interrupted them, the sound of approaching horses. Owen moved to the window, peering through the curtain. "It's them," he said grimly. "Harold and 3 others, armed." Fear clutched at Olivia's heart. "What do we do?" Owen turned to her, his expression resolute. "That depends on you. If you want to face him as my wife, we still have a few minutes to exchange vows with God as our witness. Or I can face him as your friend and neighbor, trying to protect you on moral grounds alone." Olivia stared at him, this man who'd shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who offered protection without demands. In his eyes, she saw not possession but partnership, the possibility of a life where she wasn't property but a person in her own right. "Yes," she whispered, stepping toward him. "Yes, I'll marry you." Relief and something deeper flashed across Owen's face. He took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. "I, Owen James Caldwell, take you, Olivia, to be my lawful wedded wife, to protect and respect, to support and cherish from this day forward until death parts us." The words, spoken with such simple sincerity, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. She swallowed hard before responding, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I, Olivia Elizabeth Miller, take you, Owen, to be my lawful wedded husband. To honor and support, to stand beside in good times and bad from this day forward until death parts us." Owen squeezed her hands. "Before God, I pledge myself to you as husband." "Before God, I pledge myself to you as wife." Olivia completed the simple ceremony, feeling as though something profound had shifted in the universe. Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's," he explained, slipping it onto her finger. "I've carried it with me all these years." Before Olivia could respond, a pounding at the door shattered the moment. Harold's voice, slurred with alcohol and rage, carried clearly through the wood. "Caldwell, I know she's in there. Send out my wife before I burn this place to the ground." Owen's face hardened, but he kept his voice gentle as he addressed Olivia. "Stay behind me. Let me handle this." Drawing a deep breath, he moved to the door and opened it, positioning himself in the doorway so Harold couldn't see past him. Olivia hung back, her heart pounding, but positioned herself where she could see and hear what transpired. Harold Blackwood stood on the porch, swaying slightly, his handsome face twisted with anger. The scar on his cheek stood out lividly against his flushed skin. Behind him, 3 rough-looking men lounged on their horses, watching with the detached interest of men who expected entertainment. "Where is she?" Harold demanded, attempting to peer past Owen into the house. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood," Owen replied, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "I understand you're looking for someone. Don't play games with me, Caldwell. The whole town knows you've been sniffing around my wife. Hand her over and maybe I won't beat you senseless." Owen didn't flinch at the threat. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. There's no Mrs. Blackwood here." Harold's face darkened. "She's my property, legally and morally. I've got the marriage certificate to prove it." "Interesting you should mention that," Owen said, his tone conversational despite the tension crackling in the air. "You see, I have a more recent certificate that supersedes yours." Confusion flickered across Harold's face. "What the hell are you talking about, Mrs.? "Olivia Caldwell is my lawfully wedded wife," Owen stated clearly, loud enough for Harold's companions to hear. "The ceremony was conducted properly and witnessed. Your prior claim has been dissolved by her new vows." Harold lunged forward, only to find himself staring down the barrel of a pistol that had appeared in Owen's hand with startling speed. "I wouldn't," Owen advised quietly. "I don't want bloodshed on my property, but I will defend my wife and my home if necessary." One of Harold's companions shifted uncomfortably on his horse. "Harold, if she's really married to him now—" "Shut up," Harold snarled, his eyes never leaving Owen's face. "It's a lie. No proper ceremony could have happened that fast." "Common law marriage is recognized in this territory," Owen replied evenly. Mutual consent, declaration of vows, and cohabitation, all the requirements have been met. Harold's hand hovered near his own gun. I want to hear it from her. Let me see Olivia. Owen hesitated, then called over his shoulder without taking his eyes off Harold. Olivia, would you join me? Drawing a deep breath, Olivia moved to Owen's side, lifting her chin defiantly as she faced the man who had terrorized her for years. Owen's free arm slipped protectively around her waist. Hello, Harold, she said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. Harold's eyes narrowed as he took in her position at Owen's side, the simple gold band on her finger. You think this changes anything? You're still my wife in the eyes of God. No, Olivia replied, drawing strength from Owen's solid presence beside her. I'm not. Whatever vows I made to you were broken the first time you raised your hand to me. You ungrateful, careful, Owen interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. That's my wife you're addressing. One of Harold's men cleared his throat. Harold, maybe we should go. If she's remarried, you'd need a judge to sort it out, and that could take weeks. I'm not leaving without her, Harold insisted, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice now. Yes, you are, Owen said firmly. Either peacefully right now or in a pine box after you try something foolish. Your choice. For a tense moment, Olivia thought Harold might actually draw his weapon. Then, to her astonishment, he spat on the ground and took a step back. This isn't over, he growled. I'll be back with the law. You do that, Owen replied calmly. Sheriff Taylor in Cedar Ridge knows me well. I'm sure he'd be interested to hear about the outstanding warrants for assault in Colorado territory that might apply to a man matching your description. Harold's face paled slightly. You're bluffing. Am I? Owen's expression remained impassive. I spent 6 years as a deputy marshal. I know how the law works, and I know the difference between legal marriage and unlawful imprisonment. Care to test which side of that line your treatment of Olivia falls on? A long, tense silence followed. Finally, Harold turned away with a curse. You're welcome to her, he spat. Damaged goods, that one never could please a real man. Owen's arm tightened around Olivia's waist, but his voice remained steady. Ride out, Blackwood. Don't come back to Redemption Springs if you value your freedom. They stood together in the doorway, watching as Harold and his men mounted up and rode away, dust billowing behind them in the fading light. Only when they disappeared from view did Owen lower his weapon and turn to Olivia, concern etched on his face. Are you all right? The question broke something inside her. Tears that she'd held back for years suddenly flowed freely, and Owen gathered her gently into his arms, holding her as she sobbed against his chest. He made no attempt to hush her or tell her everything would be fine. He simply held her, one hand stroking her hair as the storm of emotion passed through her. When the tears finally subsided, Olivia became acutely aware of their position, of Owen's heartbeat beneath her ear, the strength of his arms around her, the faint scent of soap and leather that clung to his skin. I'm sorry, she murmured, pulling back slightly. Don't be, Owen said softly. He reached up to brush a tear from her cheek, his touch feather light. You've been carrying that burden for a long time. Olivia nodded, suddenly shy in the face of this new intimacy between them. What happens now? Owen stepped back, giving her space. Now we make this marriage real legally, at least. We'll ride to Cedar Ridge tomorrow to see the judge and file the proper paperwork. After that, he hesitated. After that, whatever happens between us will be your choice, Olivia. I meant what I said before. This marriage can be whatever you need it to be. The simple respect in his words touched her deeply. And what if I don't know what I need? A gentle smile curved Owen's lips. Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. That night, Owen insisted that Olivia take the bedroom while he slept on a pallet near the hearth. Lying in his bed, surrounded by the subtle scent of him on the sheets, Olivia stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the tumultuous day. She was married again, legally bound to a man she'd known for only a few months. Yet somehow, despite the haste and unusual circumstances, she felt safer than she had in years. The gold band on her finger caught the moonlight streaming through the window. It felt different from the heavy ring Harold had forced onto her hand, lighter somehow, not a shackle but a promise. Morning brought the practical reality of their situation into focus. Over a simple breakfast, they discussed the journey to Cedar Ridge and what would need to be done to legitimize their marriage in the eyes of the law. "It's about a day's ride," Owen explained. "We'll need witnesses to sign affidavits. Mrs. Walsh would be a good choice, and perhaps Mr. Peterson from the store." Olivia nodded, grateful for his clear-headed approach. "What will people think about us marrying so suddenly?" Owen considered this as he poured more coffee. "They'll talk, certainly. Small towns always do. But I suspect most will understand once the truth about Harold comes out." He looked up at her. "Does it bother you, what others might think?" "No," Olivia realized with some surprise. "After everything with Harold, gossip seems a small price to pay for safety." Something like approval flickered in Owen's eyes. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Olivia Caldwell." The name sent an unexpected thrill through her. Olivia Caldwell, not Blackwood, not Miller, but Caldwell, a new identity freely chosen. They rode to town together, side by side rather than sharing a horse as they had during their escape. Mrs. Walsh was overjoyed to see them safe, though she raised an eyebrow at the ring on Olivia's finger. "I see you found a solution," she said dryly. Owen explained their plan to ride to Cedar Ridge, and Mrs. Walsh immediately agreed to be a witness. Mr. Peterson, upon hearing the situation, offered not only his signature but the use of his enclosed wagon for the journey. "More comfortable for the lady," he said with a nod to Olivia. "And less conspicuous than riding double." By midday, they were on the road to Cedar Ridge, Mrs. Walsh and Mr. Peterson following in a second wagon. Olivia sat beside Owen on the driver's bench, watching the landscape roll by and marveling at how quickly her life had changed. "Tell me about Colorado," she said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "What was it like being a deputy marshal?" Owen's hands flexed on the reins. "Harder than I expected. I took the job thinking I'd be upholding justice, protecting the innocent." A shadow crossed his face. "Some days I did, other days. I saw too many men use the law as a weapon against those who couldn't defend themselves." "Is that why you left?" He nodded slowly. "That, and I got tired of violence, of seeing the worst in people." He glanced at her. "I wanted to build something instead of just enforcing other men's rules." "And now you're married to a woman you barely know," Olivia said softly. "That wasn't part of your plan for a peaceful life." A smile touched Owen's lips. "Some detours are worth taking." Cedar Ridge was larger than Redemption Springs, with a proper courthouse and several businesses lining its main street. Judge Samuel Wilson, a gruff older man with shrewd eyes, listened to their story with thoughtful attention. "Unusual circumstances," he commented, looking between them. "But not unheard of. The law recognizes common law marriage, particularly in cases where a woman's safety is at risk." He fixed Owen with a penetrating stare. "You understand the legal and moral obligations you're undertaking, Mr. Caldwell?" "Yes, sir," Owen replied steadily. "I'll honor them fully." The judge turned to Olivia. "And you, young lady, you enter this union freely and without coercion?" "I do," Olivia said, meeting his gaze directly. "Mr. Caldwell has shown me only respect and kindness." The judge nodded, apparently satisfied. "Very well. With the sworn statements of your witnesses and the documentation I'll prepare, your marriage will be legally binding and registered with the territorial authorities." He shuffled some papers on his desk. "I understand the previous husband might contest this." "He might try," Owen acknowledged. "Well, he won't get far," Judge Wilson said firmly. "Not with my seal on these documents, and certainly not once I review the background information you've provided about his character and actions." He looked at Olivia with unexpected gentleness. "The law may be imperfect when it comes to protecting wives, Mrs. Caldwell, but it does recognize that marriage should not be a prison." By the time they left the courthouse, Olivia felt as though a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was legally Olivia Caldwell now, with the protection of both the law and the man who walked beside her. They spent the night in Cedar Ridge, Owen taking a separate room at the hotel to maintain propriety. In the morning, they began the journey back to Redemption Springs, both quieter than they had been on the outward trip, contemplating the new reality of their situation. "What will you tell people?" Olivia asked as the wagon rolled along the dusty road. "About why we married so suddenly." Owen considered this. "The truth, I think, that Harold Blackwood was a danger to you and marriage to me offered protection." He glanced at her. "Unless you'd prefer a different story," Olivia shook her head. "No, I'm tired of secrets and lies. The truth may be unusual, but it's honorable." Something like pride flickered in Owen's eyes. "Then that's what we'll tell anyone who asks." Their return to Redemption Springs caused the expected stir of gossip, but most of the townspeople rallied around them once the full story emerged. Harold Blackwood's reputation was well known in certain circles, and several people came forward with stories of his violence in other towns. Sheriff Parker, a taciturn man with a strong sense of justice, assured Owen that Harold would find no support from law enforcement if he returned. "Man like that isn't welcome here," he said simply. "You did right by the lady, Caldwell." Life settled into a new pattern. Olivia moved her few belongings into Owen's house, taking the bedroom while he continued to sleep near the hearth. They established a routine of shared meals and household tasks, learning each other's habits and preferences with careful attention. Owen never pressed for more than Olivia was ready to give. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, seeking her opinion on decisions about the ranch and respecting her boundaries without question. In the evenings, they often sat by the fire, Owen reading aloud from one of his books while Olivia worked on mending or embroidery. Gradually, tentatively, Olivia began to lower her guard. She found herself watching Owen as he worked with the horses, admiring the gentle strength with which he handled the animals. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the deep timbre of his laugh on the rare occasions she managed to amuse him, the careful precision with which he performed even the most mundane tasks. One evening, about 3 weeks after their return from Cedar Ridge, Owen found Olivia on the porch, gazing at the sunset that painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, leaning against the railing beside her. Olivia nodded, acutely aware of his presence. "I never took the time to really look at sunsets before. There was always too much work to do, too much to worry about. And now I'm learning to see beauty again." She turned to look at him, gathering her courage. "Owen, I want to thank you for everything you've done." He shook his head slightly. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." Olivia stepped closer to him. "You gave me safety when I needed it most. You've been patient and kind, never asking for anything in return." Owen's eyes held hers, something unspoken flickering in their blue depths. "Seeing you heal, watching you grow stronger each day, that's return enough." Olivia took a deep breath. "What if I want to give more?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Owen's expression softened, but he made no move toward her. "Then that would be your choice, freely made." "It is my choice," Olivia whispered, closing the distance between them. Slowly, giving him every opportunity to step away, she raised her hand to his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, the slight roughness of his beard a pleasant sensation against her palm. Owen remained perfectly still, his eyes never leaving hers. "Olivia," he murmured, her name a question and a caution. In answer, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, hesitant, a question asked and answered in the meeting of mouths. Owen's hands came to rest lightly on her waist, neither pulling her closer nor pushing her away, simply steadying her as she explored this new territory between them. When they broke apart, Olivia's heart was racing. Owen's eyes had darkened, but his expression remained gentle. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. Olivia nodded. "I'm not afraid of you, Owen. I never have been." She took his hand, leading him toward the door. "Come to bed, not to sleep on the floor, but to be with your wife." That night, Owen showed Olivia what love was meant to feel like: tender, respectful, attentive to her needs and desires. He moved with careful patience, always watching her face, stopping at the slightest sign of discomfort or hesitation. In his arms, Olivia discovered that physical intimacy could be a joy rather than a duty or a punishment. a conversation between equal partners rather than a demand to be endured. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms with her head on his chest, Olivia felt a peace she hadn't known was possible. Owen's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "All right," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "More than all right," she replied, smiling against his skin. "I never knew it could be like that." Owen's arm tightened around her. "It should always be like that, respectful, mutual." His voice grew serious. "Olivia, I want you to know that even now, nothing changes unless you want it to. If you need time or space," she silenced him with a finger to his lips. "What I need is you, Owen Caldwell. Not just for protection or security, but because I'm falling in love with you." The words, once spoken, felt right true in a way that surprised her. She hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even fully admitted the feeling to herself until that moment. Owen's face softened with wonder. "I've been falling in love with you since the day I saw you hanging laundry in Mrs. Walsh's garden," he confessed. "But I never wanted to pressure you, never wanted you to feel obligated." "I don't feel obligated," Olivia assured him, propping herself up on one elbow to look into his eyes. "I feel chosen, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I've made a choice that's truly mine." As winter settled over Redemption Springs, Olivia and Owen's marriage deepened from one of convenience into a true partnership. They worked side by side on the ranch, expanding the stables and planning for spring breeding. Olivia took over the household management, transforming the simple bachelor quarters into a warm, inviting home. Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive spirit that Olivia embraced wholeheartedly. She decorated the house with pine boughs and red ribbons, baked cookies using Mrs. Walsh's recipes, and knitted a warm scarf for Owen in secret moments when he was out with the horses. On Christmas Eve, they attended the service at the small church in town, joining their neighbors in singing carols and celebrating the holiday. Afterward, they rode home through gently falling snow, the world quiet and peaceful around them. Owen had built up the fire before they left, and the house was warm and welcoming when they returned. As Olivia removed her coat and bonnet, she noticed Owen watching her with an odd expression. "What is it?" she asked, smoothing her hair self-consciously. "I have something for you," he said. "A Christmas gift, though it's not quite finished yet." Taking her hand, he led her through the house and out the back door. There, in the yard behind the main house, stood the frame of a new building, the beginnings of a small structure with windows already installed and a partially completed roof. "What is this?" Olivia asked, puzzled. Owen's expression was a mixture of pride and nervousness. "It's going to be a schoolhouse, just a small one to start." He squeezed her hand. "You mentioned once that you'd wanted to be a teacher before your father arranged your marriage to Harold, I thought." "Well, I thought perhaps you might still want that." Olivia stared at the structure, then back at Owen, her heart swelling with emotion. "You're building me a school," he nodded. "Come spring, there will be enough children within riding distance to justify it. I've already spoken with some of the neighboring ranchers. They're willing to contribute to a teacher's salary." His eyes held hers. "Your salary if you want it." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. No one had ever supported her dreams before, had ever seen her as more than a wife or servant. "Owen," she whispered, unable to find words adequate to express what she was feeling. He gathered her gently into his arms. "You don't have to decide now, it's just an option, one of many you should have." Olivia pressed her face against his chest, overwhelmed by gratitude and love. "How did I find you?" she murmured. "What did I do to deserve this chance?" Owen tipped her face up to his. "You survived," he said simply. "You kept your heart open despite everything, and you had the courage to start again." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'm the lucky one, Olivia Caldwell." Inside, by the warmth of the fire, they exchanged their other gifts, the scarf she'd knitted for him, a beautiful leather-bound journal he'd ordered from back east for her. But the greatest gift, they both knew, was the life they were building together, a life founded on respect, partnership, and growing love. Spring brought new beginnings to the Caldwell Ranch. The horses Owen had bred produced healthy foals. The garden Olivia had planted burst into bloom, and construction on the small schoolhouse was completed. 5 children from neighboring ranches began attending lessons 3 days a week, with Olivia discovering a natural talent for teaching that brought her profound satisfaction. On a warm evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Olivia took Owen's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I have news," she said softly, watching his face. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a joy so pure it took her breath away. "A baby," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Olivia nodded, her own eyes shining. "Dr. Matthews confirmed it yesterday. Come November, there will be 3 of us." Owen gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she were made of the most precious material on earth. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair, "for this gift, for everything." As summer bloomed across the land, Olivia's body changed with the growing life inside her. Owen watched over her with tender concern, insisting she rest when needed and taking on extra tasks to spare her exertion. The schoolhouse closed for the summer months, giving Olivia time to prepare for the baby and help with the lighter ranch work. They received word that Harold Blackwood had been arrested in Nevada territory for assault, likely to serve several years in prison. The news brought a final closure to that chapter of Olivia's life, allowing her to look forward without the shadow of fear. One evening, as they sat together on a blanket near the creek that ran through their property, Olivia leaned back against Owen's chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her and their unborn child. "I never thought I could be this happy," she confessed, watching the water sparkle in the fading light. "After Harold, I didn't believe such peace was possible." Owen's hand spread gently over the swell of her stomach, where their child grew stronger each day. "You deserved so much better than what he gave you," he said quietly. "Every woman does." Olivia turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to trace the beloved lines of his face. "You showed me what love really feels like," she whispered, "not just with words, but with actions. With respect and patience and kindness." Owen leaned down to kiss her, his touch as reverent as it had been the first time. "And you taught me that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is to trust again after being hurt," he murmured against her lips. "You make me want to be worthy of that trust every day." As the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they sat together not just husband and wife, but true partners in the life they'd built from the ashes of her past. Their story had begun in fear and desperation, but it would continue in love and hope, a testament to the healing power of genuine respect and the promise of redemption that had given their town its name. In November, as the first snow dusted the mountains in the distance, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Hope, a symbol of the future they would build together. As Owen placed the tiny bundle in her arms, his eyes shining with tears of joy, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in the heart of a man who had shown her, through patience and unwavering respect, what love truly felt like. 5 years later, the Caldwell Ranch had flourished into one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the territory. The small schoolhouse had grown to accommodate 12 children, with Olivia teaching 3 days a week while caring for Hope and the twin boys James and Thomas, who had joined their family 2 years earlier. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Owen took Olivia back to the creek where they had sat that summer evening before Hope was born. A small cabin now stood nearby, a quiet retreat Owen had built with his own hands as a surprise for his wife. "For when you need a moment of peace," he explained as he showed her the simple, beautiful space. "Or for when we want to remember how it all began." As they stood together on the porch of the cabin, watching their children play in the meadow nearby, Olivia leaned her head against Owen's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Marrying a stranger to save her from a monster?" Owen turned to her, his eyes as clear and true as they had been on that desperate day when he'd offered her his name and protection. "Not for a single moment," he said, drawing her into his arms. "Some things are meant to be, Olivia Caldwell. I believe we were always destined to find each other." She rose on tiptoe to kiss him, this man who had shown her that love wasn't about possession or control, but about freedom and respect. "I believe that too," she whispered against his lips. "With all my heart." And as the sun set on another day in the life they had built together, Olivia knew that the bruises of her past had faded completely, replaced by the gentle touch of a love that had healed her soul and shown her, day by day, what love truly felt like.